Hello, welcome to Baking out of the Wilder Cookbook. Today we're going to be starting a series of live streams where we'll be going through the Wilder Cookbook to explore some of the recipes and kind of get back into the old spirit of baking at home, which is something we can do right now. So my name is Sky. I'm an interpreter here at Wilder Ranch State Park. Today we'll be joined by Rewa, who will be answering your questions in the comment bar. If you've been watching our live streams the past 4 weeks, you'll know Rewa very well. She's been doing an awesome job with connecting all of you to the park. So today I'm going to be stepping in and giving you all a little bit of taste of what it was like to be baking out at Wilder Ranch. Before I get into it, I want to give just a couple minutes for people to get in and start viewing. So I did want to go over just the updates we have for access to parks right now. So currently the parking and vehicle access to Wilder Ranch remains closed. However, if you arrive on bike or if you walk or run into the park, the trails themselves are open. And the beaches are currently closed from 11 to 5 p.m. with the exception of accessing them for water sports. So what that's saying is that you can no longer hang out on the beach except for the purpose of getting to the water. We have new updates coming out, and I encourage you to check the state park website to get the most up-to-date information. And if you do choose to visit the park, please do also consult the best safety guidelines that are also on the state park website. And those include things about social distancing, hygiene, etc. So we hope that you can come out to the park and enjoy this wonderful resource, but do so responsibly so we can remain open, keeping those gates open for the public to access. So today we are standing in the 1859 Gothic Revival meter home, and this is where the Wilders lived. But previous to the Wilders, there had been people living in this area for thousands of years. And I did want to give just a brief moment to give a land acknowledgement to the indigenous people that have been here, and that would be the Awaswas-speaking Yupi people. They have been here for thousands of years, and they remain in our communities today. So if you'd like to learn more about their connection to this resource and how they continue to be stewards of this land today, I encourage you to look up the Almamutsun Tribal Band, and you can find their website online. All right, cool. So we're going to be baking today out of the Wilder Ranch Cookbook. So I wanted to start off by just showing you what that is. So Wilder Ranch, we have a really long history of baking and wood stove baking specifically. Now, unfortunately today, I'm not going to be firing up the wood burning stove because we don't have good enough connection in the house that we have the active wood burning stove we use. However, I did want to just show off, I know we've seen it in previous live streams, but just show off real briefly the stove we have in here because it is really a gem, it's really awesome. So here we have in the back, I'll put a little bit down for you there, that is a French range, Montague French range wood burning stove. And the incredible thing about this is it's not just one stove, but actually two. So we've got one here, and it was actually spliced together here. Just one more example of how innovative the Wilders were. They would actually start a fire in here and do their baking right up here. And then you might keep things warm over here, and then maybe you would keep your irons over here like that. To keep them hot, you do your ironing here as well. So today we're going to be using a slightly more modern stove, but just wanted to show off what that's like. So once we're back open, and currently the store and the visitor center are closed, but when we're open, we do sell this book in the park gift shop, in the park store, and it's a really wonderful collection of recipes that have been handed down from the Wilders and was compiled by some of our own docents at the park. So it's a great way to connect with our history, support the park, and really honor the incredible work that our docents do out here. All right, so today we're baking cowboy cookies. It's a fun recipe, it's an easy recipe, and I am not an expert baker. I am going to be doing this recipe for the first time, and I encourage you all to do it at home as well with me. And this is meant for kids and families, and I think that baking is a really wonderful opportunity because it allows our families to come together. It's something we can all enjoy together. It's something that's fun for little kids, teenagers, adults alike, and we all enjoy what comes out of it. So I have posted the recipe on the Wilder Ranch Facebook. I posted that yesterday if you want to find it. And that will have all the ingredients and the directions, which are pretty basic. And then we're going to be walking through that as well. Now, because this is a live stream, we're not going to be able to do those fancy cuts they have in those cooking shows. So in the interest of time, I am going to, right now, throw the cookies that I've prepared into the oven. And then 20 minutes, the alarm will go off and we'll take a look at those so at least you can see the finished product. And while that's happening, we're going to go ahead and make a batch ourselves and go through the process of how that's done. So give me 1 sec while I throw the cookies in the oven, and I'll be right back with you. All right. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get into baking itself. And I just want to acknowledge what a cool opportunity this is for us to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of what the Wilders would have experienced. And they would have been a time where access to resources, which was much more limited. You couldn't just drive down to Safeway anytime you want and pick up any ingredient you want. And it's actually something we're all really in touch with right now. So it's kind of this nice connection. It's something we can all do from home. It's something we can do with our families. And I also do want to acknowledge that baking is a craze right now, and it can be really difficult to get some ingredients. So what I would say is, be creative, be flexible. They say baking is a science, but with science, there is no bad data. So give it a shot, have fun. If you're a new baker, don't be intimidated. If you are an experienced baker, you know for a fact that some of your best probably recipes you've come up with were accidents, and maybe where you mixed up ingredients or mixed up a teaspoon and a tablespoon. So don't be afraid. All data is good data, and it's probably going to taste good. All right, so I'm going to bring this down a little bit so you can see the ingredients we have here, but I also want to be in the shot. Give me 1 sec. Okay, cool. So we're going to be doing this as much as we can the old-fashioned way, with some modifications just because of constraints such as you can't use the wood-burning stove. But I do want to stick to that as much as we can. So what I'm going to do is I want to go through the ingredients. I'm going to mix them in this bowl here, and we're just going to use, if you've got a big mixing bowl, if you've got something at home, just something big that you can mix in. Of course, if you've got the electric mixer, go for it. That's why you got it. But if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, I'm using a big fork, so we can keep it pretty basic. Now, as I go through the ingredients, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the active ingredients work and why they contribute to our finished baked product. But I also want to give you some substitutes that we can use, as I said, acknowledging that it can be really hard to find some things right now. I myself traded some white flour for some wheat flour with my dad last night because he could find that at his store and I could find this at my store. So we have to get kind of creative with it sometimes. And also acknowledge that people have different dietary restrictions, and want to give some different options so that this can be accommodating for everyone. Now, so let's start with the basics. We're going to start with butter, and we are at Wilder Ranch. This is a historic dairy ranch, a creamery where they were creating some of the highest quality butter you could buy at the time. Now today, we are no longer producing butter. So I've got the store-bought. That's right here. And butter, this is a solid fat, and it's the most commonly used fat in baking, and for some good reasons. It's going to be providing this nice moisture, texture. It's also going to be kind of acting as a leavening, and I do actually want to define that term because I'll be using that a lot. Leavening is the act of rising. So we're creating something that's going to be not flat or rise up, and you're going to want different amounts with every recipe. So butter, here we've got butter, but there are substitutes, and one substitute would be just, any kind of oil. If it's something that's maybe a solid oil at room temperature, that might be better if you're replacing, so you might look at something like coconut oils are really good substitute, but other oils can work. Because I know many people, maybe if you don't eat dairy, don't tell the Wilders, but I know that's common today. But today we're using butter. So the recipe is actually makes kind of a tremendous amount of cookies. And seeing as I'm social distancing and I'm all alone here, I'm not going to follow the recipe. I'm going to half the recipe. So you know, this is going to produce quite a lot of cookies. I'm going to do half of everything that is in the recipe, and that is the same recipe that you can find on the Facebook page, Wilder's Facebook page that I posted yesterday. So the recipe calls for 1 cup of butter, so we're going to half that. So that's 4 ounces. 4 ounces, 1 stick. So you want to use soft butter. So this is, room temperature soft butter. That's going to make it a bit easier to mix. All right. And then we're going to add the sugar. So sugar is going to also add to this texture. It's going to add moisture. It's going to add a softness. And it's also going to be, yet again, another leavening product. And sugar, when it caramelizes, is also going to add that crunch that we all love. So, and then, of course, it adds sweetness. So in this recipe, it calls for both brown sugar and white sugar. The recipe calls for 1 cup of each, so we're going to do a half cup. And if you're looking for substitutes at home, either for dietary reasons or because of what's available at the store right now, you can be using things like agave, honey, molasses, maple syrup, all can act as sweeteners. So let's go ahead and we're going to add, we got white sugar right here, 1/2 cup. Right, and 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And if you've just got brown sugar, you just have white sugar at home, you can go ahead and just use that one, or if you've got a preference, that's quite all right. We can get creative with the recipe. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to add is going to be eggs. So eggs are yet another another leavener. They're going to help rise. But really, what eggs, their main purpose is that they're the binder. They're going to hold these things together. Now, in baking, we often will separate the whites from the yolks. The whites is what's going to add the stability, and the yolks are going to add a little bit of texture and flavor. In this recipe, we're going to just use the whole egg. And even though we don't produce dairy on the ranch anymore, we still do have a chicken coop, and we got chickens and they're producing, and we have our wonderful farm animal volunteers who collect those eggs, and I asked them to set me aside a couple. So we got here a Wilder Ranch egg, but any egg will do. Some alternatives for eggs you could consider. You can actually mash up like banana. Applesauce can work, and of course you're not going to get the same taste and final product, but you can get creative with it and get something that will still taste good. Another one I really love is chickpea brine. So garbanzo beans, chickpeas, whatever you want to call them. When you get them in a can, and if you you'll strain out those chickpeas. And when you do that, you do it in the sink, and if you do it like over, a strainer, you'll actually get all this kind of bubbling soapiness up that comes up from it. And that's actually going to act very similar to an egg white. And personally, I prefer using chickpea brine to egg whites. If you're making something like royal icing, you actually get a better consistency and a really, really fine white color that you actually can't get with the egg whites. So sometimes the substitutes can actually be better, but we're doing things the old-fashioned way. I don't think the Wilders would have liked if I used chickpea brine. So we're going to use an egg. All right. And next we're going to have flour. And flour is going to be kind of something that's also a binder. It's holding everything together. It's, you know, a big part of this. And it's when it combines with moisture, it is going to develop a gluten. Now, there's a lot of alternative flour products out there today, so you can look into things like spelt, oat, almond, quinoa, corn, coconut, amaranth, all these kinds of flours that can work. The recipe, it calls for 2 cups of flour, so we're going to go ahead and do 1 cup. Next up we have vanilla. The recipe is going to call for 2 teaspoons. See, we almost made a mistake there, but it turns out I love vanilla and I would have been okay with that. But we're going to do the recipe and do 1 teaspoon. There we go. Now the next product we're going to add is going to be baking soda. And baking soda and baking powder are both active leaveners, so they're going to help with rising. Now with baking soda, you want to add enough that you get a rise out of your baked good, but you don't want to add too much, because it actually kind of creates this very coarse and kind of soapy taste that can actually, you know, I found that's one way I've actually ruined things. The only good data about that data was that don't do that again. That can ruin your food. So let's see, where have I got? Baking soda right here. The recipe calls for 1 teaspoon. We're going to do 1/2 teaspoon. All right. And baking powder, or this recipe also calls for baking powder. Now, if you just have 1, sometimes you can just increase the amount of others. I don't remember off the top of my head the ratio, but you can look that up online if you just have 1 baking powder or baking soda. All right, and so for baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon. So we're going to be doing 1/4 teaspoon. And similar with this one, we want to add enough that the product is going to rise, but we don't want to add too much because it's going to create kind of a bitter flavor. Okay. Now, substitutes for baking powder, baking soda, really we're talking about substitutes for leavening products. Some things you can actually use would be like plain yogurt, buttermilk can work, lemon juice, whipped egg whites, vinegar are all things that can be substitutes to add some volume to your baked goods. Okay, and last but not least, we have salt. So I'm just going to add a little bit of salt, which is right here. And we're going to need 1 teaspoon in the recipe, so 1/2 teaspoon. Okay. All right, so that is the whole recipe. But as I said, get creative, try things. I'm going to go ahead and do my own modification on the Wilder recipe. Just a little one, just so mine are just a little different than what they've done before. We're going to try, we're going to get a little wild with it. We're going to add dried cranberries, craisins, right? So I'm going to do 1/2 of a cup. And the recipe itself, I'm going to go ahead and actually read that off to you right now, how, not the ingredients, but the instructions, which are very simple, and so simple that you might wonder, like, well, how do I actually do it? It's going to be just pretty basic, and you know, the order you mix these things in doesn't matter too much, but what it says is mix all ingredients and bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 19 to 20 minutes, depending on the size of your cookies. And then it says some optional ideas, and these are ways you can maybe just put your own flair on it, would be to add a cup of raisins, a cup of coconut, a cup of chopped nuts, a cup of chocolate chips. And what they say is that what I like about this recipe is that it's a basic cookie recipe, and you can change it up with lots of options. So there you go. The coconut is especially good and this recipe makes lots of cookies. So I decided my little tweak on the recipe is going to be cranberries. That's what's around, and I thought that would be a good addition. So, all right. So pretty basic. I'll bring it up a little closer and readjust a little bit. Because right now we're just going to mix it up pretty easy. So another reason I did the half batch, it's going to be a lot easier to mix it unless you have a really big mixing bowl or you got your fancy KitchenAid mixer at home, and then maybe you're going to just make enough for your whole family and for the next week. I don't know. So I'm just going to mix this up, and while I do that, I wanted to do a little plug for a little project we've been doing here at Wilder with our docents. And it's been just something that's just been for fun, to kind of keep people engaged at home, keep people connected to the park. And we've been doing an at-home baking friendly contest using the Wilder Cookbook. So we've asked our docents, and we have some wonderful docent bakers, to use any recipe that's in the Wilder Cookbook and bake at home, bake with your family, and then take pictures of the process and the finished product. And with those pictures, they sent them in, and we've put them onto Facebook as a poll. And I'm hoping that if Rewa can put the link up in the comments, you'll be able to take the poll yourself if you're interested, and tell us which recipe you think, and which baked good you think out of the cookbook looks the best to you. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to taste them, and that's of course a big part of baking. But we're working with what we got right now. We're all at home, and I hope that, seeing this and checking in and seeing what the docents are doing, you can actually yourself come back to the park once we're open again and experience some of this like Victorian baking we do in the 1897 Victorian home using the original wood burning stove. It's a really incredible opportunity to learn hands-on, to experience it not just through text or a tour, but experience life of the Wilders through your taste buds. So really special opportunity. And in regular times, we tend to have wood stove baking offered at any of our special events. And we also even do it with school kids. When we have ranch kids stay out here with third graders, they're baking molasses cookies and having a great time. So it's just a great experience for people all ages. So, all right, getting this pretty well mixed up. So here we go. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it on a pan. I'm just going to go take a look and see how we're doing on the cookies in the oven. All right. Just a couple more minutes. And they're looking like they're coming along just fine. The next step is we're going to be putting them onto it didn't specify in the recipe book, but I went with a lightly greased pan, so it didn't say whether or not. So I imagine it will probably be okay either way. Now I am going to step off for 1 second because I'm going to wash my hands before I actually touch the batter and put it onto the pan. So give me 1 sec. All right. Oh, Bob, I see that comment or question about where do you find the cookbook. So typically we have it available in our park store. Right now with the park store not being open, it would be hard to access. What we will be doing is we're going to be going through some different recipes week by week. I'll be posting those recipes along as we do them, so you'll get a little taste of it. But for right now, that is something that would be a little bit hard to get for yourself. So we're almost there. Let me see. Okay, just about there. So I'm going to pull these out in just a sec. We'll take a look at the finished product, see what you can do at home and just how easy this really is. And invite you to join us again next week, and we'll be baking another recipe out of the Wilder Cookbook. And if you'd like to tune in later today at 3 o'clock, we'll be live streaming once again from Wilder, and this time we're going to be taking a look into the machine shop. There's our cookies. Into the machine shop, and from there we will be talking about the Pelton wheel. So a really incredible innovation that the Wilders had. So I encourage you to tune in with us then. And those look just about right to me. So this was 19 minutes, so it said 19 or 20. But I went for 19, and they look like they're just about right, depending on your preference. I think you could leave them in for another minute to get a little crispy, but they're just starting to get crispy around the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and call it there, put them off to the side and let them cool. And I thank you all for joining me today, and I hope to see you again soon. All right, take care.